New York City, 2019. The skyline glimmered under the late autumn sun as people rushed through the glass canyons of Wall Street. To most, it was another day of trades, numbers, and coffee. But for Daniel Reeves, senior analyst at the Federal Reserve Bank, today felt different. He had just discovered something he wasn't supposed to. It began with a small irregularity, a transaction pattern buried deep within the Federal Reserve's digital clearing system. Billions of dollars had been reconciled across multiple banks in under a second, with no visible trail. The records looked perfect, too perfect. Daniel leaned closer to the screen. "No system is flawless," he whispered. The deeper he dug, the stranger it became. The same algorithm that corrected banking errors seemed to also create them. Tiny digital ghosts vanishing as soon as they appeared. When he tried to trace the code, he found encrypted segments referencing a private offshore entity, Aegis Holdings, registered in the Cayman Islands. He frowned. That's not supposed to exist in Fed software. Across town, in a high-rise office with mirrored windows, Clara Wynn, Chief Technology Officer at Dominion Capital Bank, watched a dashboard of moving numbers. Her team had just triggered another balancing sequence. Billions flickered across her screen, routed through dummy accounts, each cycle lasting less than 3 seconds. She smiled faintly. "And they'll never find it," she murmured. Behind her, an older man entered. Thomas Garrick, Dominion's CEO. His voice was calm, precise, like the ticking of a clock. "Everything clean?" "Cleaner than sunlight," Clara replied. He nodded. "Good, keep it that way. The Fed's watching again." Meanwhile, Daniel printed a copy of the transaction logs, something he almost never did. He folded them, slid them into a brown envelope, and left his office. Outside, the city hummed, indifferent, unstoppable. He didn't know it yet, but that envelope was worth more than $10 billion, and it could cost him his life. 2 days later, Daniel Reeves sat in a dim cafe near Bryant Park, his laptop open and his nerves on edge. The rain outside drew streaks down the window, blurring the lights of the city. He'd been combing through thousands of encrypted transaction records, data that should never have been accessible outside the Fed's secure network. Every pattern pointed to the same ghost, Aegis Holdings. Each balancing cycle siphoned money from microtransactions spread across major U.S. banks. Fractions of a cent, invisible to ordinary audits, but collectively worth billions. It was genius and terrifying. Daniel rubbed his temples. "Who the hell are you, Aegis?" he muttered. A familiar voice interrupted. "Still chasing shadows, Danny?" He looked up. It was Erin Cole, his ex-colleague from the Fed's cybersecurity division. She was sharp, witty, and one of the few people he trusted. "You shouldn't be here," Daniel said quietly. "Relax," she smiled. "I got your message. You said you found something big." He hesitated, then turned the laptop toward her. She scrolled through lines of code, eyes narrowing. "This looks like a cross-system exploit. Multiple bank APIs, automated laundering. Damn. Whoever built this knows the Fed's architecture inside out." Daniel leaned in. "So this isn't just Dominion Capital?" "No, this is coordinated. You're looking at a syndicate of banks, maybe even people inside the Federal Reserve itself." Before he could respond, Erin's screen flickered. Her cursor froze, then a single message appeared in bold white letters. "Stop." She yanked the cable from the Wi-Fi hotspot, but it was too late. The laptop had been breached. Daniel's heart pounded. "They're watching us." "More like listening too," she whispered. "We need to move." They packed quickly and slipped into the rain. Behind them, a black sedan idled across the street, its headlights dimmed. Inside, a man in a grey suit spoke into his earpiece. "They've made contact. Proceed with surveillance." That night, Daniel stayed at a cheap motel on the outskirts of Queens. Erin ran diagnostics on what remained of the corrupted files. "They wiped half your evidence," she said. "But look, a timestamp survived. 02:47 a.m., routed through a private data center in Virginia. Dominion's digital backbone." Daniel stared at it. "So we find the server, and we expose them." Erin looked uneasy. "You realize what that means, right? These people have political immunity. Dominion funds half of Congress. You take one wrong step and you're done. Daniel gave a dry smile. Then I'll make it count. Somewhere in Virginia, inside an underground server farm lit by cold blue LEDs, Clara Wynne reviewed a report from her internal security team. Minor breach attempt, traced to a Fed credential, neutralized, she sighed. It was bound to happen. Then she added softly, if he gets too close, eliminate the variable. 3 days later. A grey morning fog blanketed Washington, D.C. when Agent Marcus Hale of the FBI's Financial Crimes Division received an anonymous envelope. No return address, just a single word written on the back. Trust. Inside were photocopies of transaction logs, the same ones Daniel Reeves had printed from the Fed system. Hale frowned. The data looked authentic, but the implications were staggering. Billions had been cycled through government-backed accounts without detection. Whoever uncovered this had just opened a Pandora's box. He dialed his contact at the Treasury Department. Ever heard of something called Aegis Holdings? A pause, then, Hale, hang up, walk away. That name's poison. The line went dead. Meanwhile, Daniel and Erin had made their way to Richmond, Virginia, a few miles from Dominion Capital's primary data center. They'd been traveling under fake names, sleeping in motels, constantly looking over their shoulders. Erin had hacked together a portable signal interceptor, something that could trace the digital signature of Dominion's shadow network. At 2 a.m., sitting in a rented car near a chain-link fence, Erin whispered, "Got it. The server's active. Transmission window in 20 seconds. Daniel tightened his grip on the steering wheel. Then we move now. They scaled the fence and slipped inside through a maintenance door. The air was cold, the hum of thousands of servers echoing like machinery from another world. Erin plugged her drive into a nearby console. "Downloading system map," she said. "We have less than 5 minutes." Suddenly, the lights flickered. A voice came through the intercom. Calm, female. "Mr. Reeves, you should have stopped when you had the chance." Daniel froze. "Clara Wynne." "Correct," she replied. "You're in a facility monitored by Dominion's private security. You won't make it out alive." Erin hit a key. "We're not leaving empty-handed." Then, alarms, red lights flashed, and guards flooded the hallway. Daniel grabbed the drive and pulled Erin behind a row of metal racks. They ran toward the emergency exit, bullets shattering glass and ricocheting off steel. Outside, rain poured as they sprinted into the woods behind the complex. A black SUV followed, its headlights slicing through the trees. They dove into a drainage culvert, gasping for breath. Erin clutched her arm, blood soaking through her jacket. "Keep going," she said. "Get it to someone who can use it." Daniel hesitated. "I'm not leaving you. You have to. The data's the only thing that matters now." He looked at her, then at the drive glowing faintly in his palm. The proof of a $1 trillion crime. By dawn, Daniel had reached a rest stop off Interstate 95. Exhausted, drenched, and alone, he opened his phone, a burner. One message blinked on the screen. "If you want the truth to live, meet me. Lincoln Memorial, midnight." He hesitated, then typed back, "Who is this?" A reply came seconds later. "FBI, Agent Hale." That night, under the shadow of Abraham Lincoln's statue, the two men met. "You're the one who sent the logs?" Hale asked. Daniel nodded. "And you're the only one who hasn't tried to kill me yet." Hale smirked. "Give me that drive. I'll make sure it reaches the right hands." Daniel shook his head. "No, we go public. Press, media, everything." Hale looked uneasy. "You don't understand. Dominion has half of Washington in its pocket. If we leak this wrong, you'll disappear, and I'll lose my badge." Daniel's eyes were cold. "Then we leak it right." Behind them, the sound of a car door echoed. Headlights flared. Clara Wynne stepped out, flanked by two armed men. "Mr. Reeves," she said softly, "you're a very difficult problem to solve." Hale reached for his weapon. Clara smiled. "Don't bother. You're both already dead men." The air at the Lincoln Memorial felt colder than it should have that night. The statue's granite face like a mute witness to every confession. Clara Wynne's smile never reached her eyes. Behind her, Thomas Garrick's jaw was a stone line, an old man used to calling in favors and having them answered. The two armed men flanking them were the physical proof that money could always buy muscle when the law seemed inconvenient. Daniel felt the drive press hard against his palm, the little LED light steady like a heartbeat. His throat was dry, but his voice did not tremble. "You don't have to do this," he said. "It's over. We can expose it and let the system fix what's broken." Clara tilted her head. "Fix it? Mr. Reeves, you have no idea what it takes to keep markets from collapsing. Aegis was designed as a safety valve. We only accelerated what everyone already does. Move money, manage risk. We simply made it more efficient." "You call theft efficiency," Daniel said. "You siphoned money from people who'll never know their accounts were skimmed. You bought senators. You erased audits. That's not safety. That's a private rescue fund for the rich." A low whistle came from behind the trees. For a second, everyone froze. Then headlights cut through the dark and a line of FBI vehicles rolled into view. Agents spilled out, weapons trained on Clara and Garrick. Agent Marcus Hale stepped forward into the pool of light, hands visible. "You made a mistake," Hale said, but there was no mockery in his voice this time. "You thought you controlled everything. You forgot how many people are willing to fight corruption." Clara's face hardened. "Hale, save it," he replied. He raised one hand, and another team behind him produced a microscopically thin device, the same make as the drive Daniel held. "You thought you could silence the Fed forever," Hale continued, "but someone else was listening. Someone very loud." Daniel's fingers tightened on the drive. "So we win?" "Not yet." Hale's eyes flicked to Daniel with gratitude and something like regret. "We need this public, right now, but the Attorney General's phone is already buzzing in pockets you've bought. If Dominion moves fast, they will bury this in lawsuits and gag orders. We have to cut the head off the snake on camera." Hale nodded once to an agent who keyed a satellite uplink. A feed was patched into every online independent newsroom Hale trusted. The operative said, "Live in 30 seconds. Clara's jaw twitched. Garrick swore. "You can't," he began, but a chorus of sirens filled the air as additional units arrived, sealing exits. Daniel thought of Erin, of the rain-slicked culvert, and the drive that had cost her. He thought of his brown envelope, of the innocent pattern in the logs that had refused to dissolve. He thought of mothers whose tiny savings had been raided, of pensions and microtransactions and invisible theft. He swallowed. "Go live," he said. Hale hit the send. The world blinked as the feed went up. The drive's contents were streamed. Transaction maps, timestamps, internal memos, audio files, and a direct extract from Dominion's own servers that detailed payment swings, shell companies, and the Aegis algorithms. It was surgical, devastating, undeniable. In minutes, reporters poured into the feed. Social media took the documents and tore them open. Independent analysts began to rebuild the transactions into plain language. Billions in micro-siphons, offshores named and linked, politicians listed as recipients of stability contributions. A narrative threaded through the data that could not be dressed up with legalese. Inside the crowd, a single phone buzzed with a congressional aide's message, "We need a briefing, now." In another, a senator's lawyer called to demand a halt, but the internet was already a wildfire. Newsrooms that could not be bought were rebroadcasting the files. For every attempt to muzzle the truth, thousands of small streams multiplied the signal. Clara's composure cracked. She turned to Garrick, fury and fear fighting on her face. "Shut it down," she ordered. "Order a takedown. Use the legal teams. Use everything." Garrick looked like a man realizing that money had bought him more time than immortality. He barked orders into his collar, but the lawyers were a step behind the speed of open-source truth. Lobbyists scrambled, but the data was already in the hands of the public and of oversight committees who could not easily be silenced overnight. Shots rang out. One of the guards, panicking, fired at an agent. In the chaos, Dale, a young field agent who had been sent to secure the perimeter, took a hit. Agents returned fire, disarming rather than killing where possible, and the gunman went down. It was ugly, fast, and horribly real. Daniel watched the flash and felt the moral weight of his choice settle in like cold water. Later, in a long room with fluorescent lights and plastic chairs, Clara and Garrick were read their rights. Agents carried sealed drives with mirrored copies of the footage and the logs. Agent Hale, who had once received instructions to stand down, now sat across from Daniel, rubbing his temples. You did good, Hale said quietly, but not everything will be neat. Expect civil suits, expect delays, expect the powerful to claw. Daniel nodded. We also exposed the system. And Erin? Hale asked. Daniel's face closed. She's alive. The words surprised them both. Erin had been taken to a hospital under an alias, stitched and shaken, but alive. Her quick thinking had replanted seeds of proof across multiple caches. She would recover. She had already begun to leak small fragments to encryption-safe journalists. Her fingerprints were on half the ragged trail that had opened the case. Weeks unfolded like a legal war. Congressional hearings streamed on loop. Garrick and Clara were indicted on charges of racketeering, wire fraud, and conspiracy. Several politicians faced ethical inquiries. A few careers ended quietly. Dominion's stock plummeted as clients fled. Aegis Holdings' shell entities were frozen by emergency warrants. The Fed commissioned an external audit that forced uncomfortable conversations about oversight and the seductive idea that emergency tools could be privatized by those with enough influence. But the story didn't end with handcuffs and headlines. The Aegis Code, clever, adaptable, had been designed to learn. The public debate cut several ways. Some called for more automated stabilizers in times of crisis. Others demanded stricter human oversight. Daniel watched as legislators argued, lobbyists whispered, and the markets absorbed the aftershock. The law moved slower than outrage, and institutions tended to steady rather than be remade. One evening, months later, Daniel walked past a small coffee shop where he had once sat with Erin. She lifted her head and waved. Her hand was bandaged, her spirit mostly returned. He took a seat. They didn't speak at first. They both carried the quiet knowledge of what had been given and taken. You ever think we changed anything? Erin asked finally, stirring her coffee. Daniel studied the steam. I don't know if we changed the system, he said, but we proved it wasn't invulnerable. That counts. Erin smirked. That's a dangerous belief to have, Daniel. It's the only encouraging one I have, he replied. Outside, the city moved on. Trades clacking, buses rumbling, people arguing about sports scores on their phones. Power remained messy. The law was imperfect. Those with money still had ways to tilt the scales. But somewhere between the streamed files and the hearings and the slow legal grind, a new narrative had been written. Systems could be gamed, but they could also be called to account. And for a while, that made the night at the Lincoln Memorial feel like a hinge, one small point that could swing the rest of the world, if only for a moment. The drive's LED kept its steady pulse in Daniel's pocket, a reminder that proof had been the currency that bought a reckoning. He did not know what the future would demand of him next. He only knew one thing plainly: the truth had been put into the light, and light, once given, has a way of finding every corner it was kept from.